than tools, to the minor products rather than to the means of production. But something of the sanity of ownership is still to be observed. For instance, the element of custom and continuity. It was an old cherry briar, systematically smoked by father in spite of all wiles and temptations to woodbines and gas burrs, an old companion possibly, connected with various romantic or diverting events in father's life. It is perhaps a relic as well as a trinket. But because it is not a true tool, because it gives the man no grip on the creative energies of society, it is, with all the rest of his self-respect, at the mercy of the thing called the sack. When he gets the sack from the waterworks, it is only too probable he will have to pawn his old cherry briar, 'cause he might set the waterworks on fire. And that single line, like the lovely single lines of the great poets, is so full, so final, so perfect a picture of all the laws we pass and all the reasons we give for them, so exact an analysis of the logic of all our precautions at the present time, that the pen falls even from the hands of the commentator, and the masterpiece is left to speak for itself. Some such analysis as the above gives a better account than most of the anomalous attitude and situation of the English proletarian to-day. It is more appropriate because it is expressed in the words he actually uses, which certainly do not include the word proletarian. It will be noted that everything that goes to make up that complexity is in an unfinished state. Property has not quite vanished. Slavery has not quite arrived. Marriage exists under difficulties. Social regimentation exists under restraints, or rather under subterfuges. The question which remains is which force is gaining on the other, and whether the old forces are capable of resisting the new. I hope they are, but I recognise that they resist under more than one heavy handicap. The chief of these is that the family feeling of the workman is by this time rather an instinct than an ideal. The obvious thing to protect an ideal is a religion. The obvious thing to protect the ideal of marriage is the Christian religion. And for various reasons which only a history of England could explain, though it hardly ever does, the working classes of this country have been very much cut off from Christianity. I do not dream of denying, indeed I should take every opportunity of affirming, that monogamy and its domestic responsibilities can be defended on rational, apart from religious grounds. But a religion is the practical protection of any moral idea which has to be popular and which has to be pugnacious. And our ideal, if it is to survive, will have to be both. Those who make merry over the landlady who has seen better days, of whom something has been said already, commonly speak in the same jovial journalese about her household goods as her household gods. They would be much startled if they discovered how right they are. Exactly what is lacking to the modern materialist is something that can be what the household gods were to the ancient heathen. The household gods of the heathen were not only wood and stone. At least there is always much more than that in the stone of the hearthstone and the wood of the roof-tree. So long as Christianity continued the tradition of patron saints and portable relics, this idea of a blessing on the household could continue. If men had not domestic divinities, at least they had divine domesticities. When Christianity was chilled with Puritanism and rationalism, this inner warmth or secret fire in the house faded on the hearth. But some of the embers still glow, or at least glimmer, and there is still a memory among the poor that their material possessions are something sacred. I know poor men for whom it is the romance of their lives to refuse big sums of money for an old copper warming pan. They do not want it in any sense of base utility. They do not use it as a warming pan. But it warms them for all that. It is indeed, as Sergeant Buzfuz humorously observed, a cover for a hidden fire. And the fire is that which burned before the strange and uncouth wooden gods like giant dolls in the huts of ancient Italy. It is a household god, and I can imagine some such neglected and unlucky Englishman dying with his eyes on the red gleam of that piece of copper, as happier men have died with their eyes on the golden gleam of a chalice or cross. It will thus be noted that there has always been some connection between a mystical belief and the materials of domesticity, that they generally go together, and that now, in a more mournful sense, they are gone together. The working classes have no reserves of property with which to defend their relics of religion. They have no religion with which to sanctify and dignify their property. Above all, they are under the enormous disadvantage of being right without knowing it. They hold their sound principles as if they were sullen prejudices. They almost secrete their small property as if it were stolen property. Often a poor woman will tell a magistrate that she sticks to her husband with the defiant and desperate air of a wanton resolved to run away from her husband. Often she will cry as hopelessly and as it were helplessly when deprived of her child as if she were a child deprived of her doll. Indeed, a child in the street crying for her lost doll would probably receive more sympathy than she does. Meanwhile, the fun goes on, and many such conflicts are recorded even in the newspapers, between heartbroken parents and house-breaking philanthropists, always with one issue, of course. There are any number of them that never get into the newspapers, and we have to be flippant about these things as the only alternative to being rather fierce. And I have no desire to end on a note of universal ferocity. I know that many who set such machinery in motion do so from motives of sincere but confused compassion, and many more from a dull but not dishonourable medical or legal habit. But if I and those who agree with me tend to some harshness and abruptness of condemnation, these worthy people need not be altogether impatient with our impatience. It is surely beneath them, in the scope of their great schemes, to complain of protests so ineffectual about wrongs so individual. I have considered in this chapter the chances of general democratic defence of domestic honour, and have been compelled to the conclusion that they are not at present hopeful, and it is at least clear that we cannot be founding on them any personal hopes. If this conclusion leaves us defeated, we submit that it leaves us disinterested. Ours is not the sort of protest, at least, that promises anything even to the demagogue, let alone the sycophant. Those we serve will never rule, and those we pity will never rise. Parliament will never be surrounded by a mob of submerged grandmothers brandishing pawn tickets. There is no trade union of defective children. It is not very probable that modern government will be overturned by a few poor dingy devils who are sent to prison by mistake, or rather by ordinary accident. Surely it is not for those magnificent socialists or those great reformers and reconstructors of capitalism, sweeping onward to their scientific triumphs and caring for none of these things, to murmur at our vain indignation. At least, if it is vain, it is less venal, and in so far as it is hopeless, it is also thankless. They have their great campaigns and cosmopolitan systems for the regimentation of millions and the records of science and progress. They need not be angry with us who plead for those who will never read our words or reward our effort, even with gratitude. They need surely have no worse moods toward us than mystification, seeing that in recalling these small things of broken hearts or homes, we are but recording what cannot be recorded, trivial tragedies that will fade faster and faster in the flux of time, cries that fail in a furious and infinite wind, wild words